Okay, so we had a nice session to start the morning to sort of take a big picture look at what trends are hitting us across the globe, looking a lot at sort of these large demographic trends, as well as trends with things like AI, machinery, sort of the fourth industrial revolution. What we're going to do now is we're going to let three of our academic fellows from ISBM about what they think. So we'll have a little bit of a structured Q&A with them after I introduce them to you. And then we'll open it up to the audience, and we'll have Lynn running around with Mike, and you can ask them some questions. Wait for the mic because the Zoom recording only picks up sound from the mics. So if you just yell out a question online, people won't hear what you're saying. Start by introducing our three guests. Mentioned. There are three of our on the manager. Oh. Oh. Text. Not a good. Oh, my sound. Oh, let me check the sound because it's on the mic here. Let me just make sure. Excellent. All right, maybe I just need to, I can hold it up here for a bit. So on the far left, my far right, Dr. She's currently a professor of marketing at Emory University and does a lot of work in B2B strategy, especially strategic partnering, multi-channel management, channel and retailing strategy. She has had several books published as well. She's associated with AMA, MSI. She's with ISBM. So we have three highly distinguished. I want to give them a moment. Have any opening remarks, and then we'll dive into the questions. We'll start here.
Yeah. Sorry, this is hitting on the face.
You can keep seated if you want.
I
standing up and sitting down is not safe.
Well, I'm used to standing. You know, I'm always.
Sorry,
is the mic on? Can you all hear me? Fine. Thank you. Good morning to all of you. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be with you all. You know, he introduced me, but the most accomplished award for me is that, which he forgot to tell. I was fortunate to be his advisor and mentor. And that's the most important thing for me right now, you know. So he's done so well, so proud of him. And, you know, Penn State is fortunate to have him here. But with the three thoughts that I have, I want to start with this one is that we had an excellent presentation and a lot of triggers presented in the first session. But there are three triggers that I've been working on in the B2B that was not highlighted in the previous one. One is, which I want to add is, one is climate change, how it is affecting the B2B practice, B2B strategies. Second is sustainability, how it is affecting the same B2B strategy and practice. And the third is the integration or the advent of new age technology processes, that how it is displacing the production process, the human thing. Just I'll give you one example and then give the floor to the others. We'll continue with the examples of each of this: climate change, sustainability. Right now, I got the data set from Johns Hopkins University on breast cancer and spinal cord lesion and everything. So we have a lot of imaging. It could be X-ray imaging, ultrasound, or MRI. So we are using an AI tool. When I say we, me and my student, we are just predicting the onset of each of this. Okay, so our B2B client here is the hospitals, doctors. The biggest thing we thought, like, oh my God, they'll come and tell us, save the world by doing this. They're saying, you are putting us out of jobs. Radiologists are the first one to complain, saying that this is not the right thing to do. Prior to this, with another doctoral student, we're done with the movie industry, doing script analysis, which scripts will be successful for Hollywood, in terms of domestic box office revenue and ROI. And the screenwriters came and attacked us, saying that you're putting us out of business. You cannot have a tool that says that our script is going to be making money or not. So in terms of anything we do now, there are consequences that we need to, the research cannot stop with how can we help the industry, but how do we deal with the consequences also? Thank you.
Raji, please.
Very much. And it's actually extremely unusual to talk to an audience of practitioners and academics. So I'm kind of grateful to be here. I agreed with much of what Fari spoke about in terms of demographic shifts, the effects on technology and so on. I've been thinking about some of these issues myself. Unless you're like Stephen Colbert and you don't see race, you know that I might be from India or from South Asia. And I've been in the United States now for about 30 years, close to 30 years. And I think some of these things were years in the making. In fact, I would say there were centuries in the making. I come from India, and we had imperialism there. We had Robert Clive under the East India Company come over and take the country and run the country to the ground. We got English, we got cricket, and we got railways. I'm glad we didn't get French, because anytime the French went in, they didn't really play a big role because of the language, lingua franca, whatever. It was not. The second, piece that I want to sort of talk about is he mentioned Tom Friedman, the book, The Flattening of the World. I kind of read it. I've read it very closely. It was actually around 1990, and that was for the Germans in the room when the wall came down. And I think what we are witnessing from 1990 to now is really a battle between different political systems. Socialism, capitalism, nation state. And I think what has happened is the political center and the economic center has been shifting to the right, at least in the United States. Things that were considered to be, sort of acceptable are no longer acceptable in various ways. And I'm not arguing for one political system over the other. If any of you are interested in reading more about this, Joseph Stiglitz, he's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He's written some books on information asymmetry, and his latest book, I think it came out last month, Road Forward, and he talks about the things that Fari was talking about, inequality and all of that. So I think there are much bigger changes that are going on that we tend to think it's like technology or happened in the last 10 years, but I think they've been centuries in the making. When the British came to India, or the French went to parts of Africa, or the Belgians went to part of Africa, nobody asked for any permission. There was no, like, show me your papers, stand in line, go back, So I think some of this is coming. And I think part of this is also driven by technology. We have planes now, people can just get on a tourist visa and come into a country and then just get into that system. So you're seeing some of that. I disagreed a little bit, or I just thought a little differently, because he was using Europe and US in the same, breath. I do think the US will find different solutions to the problem than Europe will. I think Europe is a set of nations, that don't necessarily agree. And even in the United States, we have states that don't agree with each other. But I think, the solutions might be different in the way we kind of see this. Finally, I agree with what VK just said. I think one piece that was missing was the climate risk. June 27th, anybody here from Mexico? June 27th is day 0 in Mexico City. They're going to run out of water. This is Mexico City. And the mayor who ran it is now the prime minister of the country or president. But that's another story. But I think water, air, pollution risks, those are all really, really serious threats. And I don't know how we're going to address it because there are externalities. I can benefit from it, if I'm an oil company, but we all will end up paying the cost. So those are some thoughts of mine. I'm not going to talk about research because I'm sort of, trying to think about the bigger issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Raji. Some thoughts.
Hi, everyone. So let me just say, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. And I was telling the students at the PhD camp yesterday, any ISBM event is always my favorite. So as a B2B researcher, you all are my peeps, and I'm happy to be here. I even, I don't know if you remember this, Gary, but I won an ISBM dissertation support competition, and I had 4 member firms who participated in my dissertation and therefore allowed me to graduate, get a PhD. So I'm always grateful to the ISBM. I enjoyed the conversation this morning with Fari. I think he did a great job of kind of getting us to, I kind of feel a little like I was left at the edge of the cliff there at the end. So, I mean, yeah, I agree that the future is hard to predict, but I really wanted to know what it is because I'm sort of a planner and I'd like to know. So we can all speculate, and I think that's probably what we're going to do in this time here. I will just kind of give you a couple insights that that kind of impressed me from his talk. And the first is just this notion of, from the very beginning and then throughout, even till the end, he mentioned the need for and the role of partnerships and alliances, both in advancing technology and potentially in maybe even solving global issues going forward. And that happens to be a topic of research that I've spent most of my life looking at. It's one that's near and dear to my heart. I have a book about it. And actually, Ralph wrote me some very complimentary things at the beginning. So, if we think about the role of partnerships and alliances, the one thing that a partnership and alliance does is it allows 2 organizations or 2 parties to kind of, economists have this view of every firm, you can even think of every individual, we each have our own sort of efficiency frontier. And that efficiency frontier is the best and the most we can do in and of ourselves. But in a partnership and alliance, what you do is both those firms kind of move out a new joint efficiency frontier. And that's kind of the way that you're able to reach, or that's the way that 2 + 2 can equal 5. And so I do see that as potentially an important role going forward. But I will tell you in a very short way that it's not an easy thing to do. So, whether we become partners with China or India, most likely it'll be sort of an frenemization kind of form. So that's one thought. My other thought is just on the issue of immigration. So I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the US from Indonesia. And at the time, the immigration policies were very different from today. So at that time, if you had a bachelor's degree, you were able to, I didn't come over on a boat. I came on a plane. And, but it's a different world now. And I think the immigration issue it's a major, major issue. I think he clearly has underscored it with the statistics, but I think about that going forward. Andrew?
So thank you. So those are some nice comments to kind of get their reflection on sort of Fari's thoughts. Now I want to turn to their own thoughts about what they're thinking about, what they're working with businesses on right now. What are the topics that are being discussed? And so on. So I'm going to give each of them a little bit of time to talk a little bit about their own current experiences. You heard a little bit of an example here, but I have no doubt there's many more. So VK, if you want to share some thoughts.
Yeah, I've been asked to sit and talk, but I don't feel comfortable, but that's okay. To respect my colleagues, so. Yeah, I heard about the left chair, so I'm going to ask you a question. This was asked to us by one of the luxury brand manufacturer, that if they switch from using real leather to vegan leather, would that still be considered as a luxury brand? Would the distributors be willing to carry this product? Would consumers be willing to buy? So we did research, 3-year research on this. And the study is forthcoming. but I want to ask this question sort of in an interactive manner to say that what does it take? Just to give you a background, a luxury brand is typically positioned as or becomes a luxury brand due to its positioning, high price, selective, exclusive distribution, high quality material, and the demand that is created for the product, maybe due to scarcity. All these elements go into defining the luxury brand. But then so actually the story got a twist this morning's news. How many of you have heard the phrase YOLO, Y-O-L-O? You only live once. YOLO economy is gone. YOLO has come in. So what does this YOLO? So when the pandemic hit us, people were dying. Unfortunately, the attitude of the consumers became YOLO. You live only once, and they splurged on buying a lot of these luxury items. The demand went up and everything. And all these things happened. But now, so that was one of the things with the inflation, what is going on, and how can demand continuously go up. But now that money is gone. Now it's become YOLO economy. And so these luxury brands which thrived during that YOLO economy, Gucci, for example, started discounting their products. And that became headline news, whether it's still a luxury brand, because you are now being discounted, which is never heard of. You go to Louis Vuitton store, we stand in the line in Paris to go to the store. That's the image we created. So if you have examples of Gucci being downgraded now, not as a luxury brand due to discounted prices, will these luxury brands get downgraded because they don't use real leather, but vegan leather? Like Stella McCartney is a classic example that how she uses from mushroom plant, she uses vegan leather, and Stella McCartney's thing, but she's doing well, but it's a small market. So I'll go in phases, but this one of the research, first one that I want to bring it to you and put the questions to you just to react to this as to what do you think is the answer? Will they be a luxury brand if they switch from, and why is the need to switch? Of course, using sustainability concepts, practices. I'll leave it to the floor. Any thoughts? What do you think? Gucci, I gave you example. Yes, sir. Yeah.
My answer would be yes. Appealing to the emotional need, vegan has some additional cachet in a luxury brand, so that would be a positive. Also, the thing that people love about leather is not just the prestige, but what it does for you. It smells good, it feels all natural, and it doesn't get too hot in hot weather or too cold in cold weather. So I would guess yes.
And anybody else? Any thought? Because we did three things for this research. One is we asked consumers directly. We asked distributors, what would you carry this product? We went to the manufacturers also as to what motivated you. And the study has got this triangulation approach. And that's why we titled the study as is Sustainability Practices and Luxury Branding, a friend or a foe. A friend or a foe is the title. Yeah.
I think what's confusing, or it seems very interesting to me looking at it as a consumer, is it actually feels like we have so many more choices we have to make. It's not just luxury or kind of mid-tier brand. Is it vegan? Is it sustainable? Is it natural? Is it cruelty-free? Is it, there's so many more categories we have to think about. And some of those categories feel disingenuous. We see a lot of greenwashing. So it almost feels like there's no right choice or right solution that cuts through all of that and meets all of the needs. Now we have so many more needs that we have to meet. So it makes it a very complex landscape to make a choice as a consumer. And then as businesses, we're also thinking, how do we market our solutions? And from a B2C perspective, which of those needs can you meet? You can't meet all of them. Sustainable doesn't mean the same thing to different people. So how do you define that and make that decision about what matters most?
So you didn't give you a verdict.
think it's too gray. There's no one solution. You just have to look at what matters to your consumer and decide what is most important, because you can't do everything. You can't boil the ocean. You have to decide.
I agree all.
what
I
you
just
need.
want, like he said, yes, still it'll be a luxury brand. You say switching to vegan, yes or no?
I would say yes, there is a market for a luxury brand to say something is vegan to one person. To somebody else, they're going to say, well, it's not real leather. It doesn't have the same value to me. It's just plastic. So it's going to depend on the individual consumer, whether that counts as luxury or whether it's been devalued by doing that.
Okay, right here.
Gary, you need to
Sorry.
train this. You're trained as well. Answer the question. You say when we ask the question. So that's what I was going for that.
All right, I'm gonna go with the initially would hurt, eventually, when we learn to better brand and get acceptance, it can fly. But for me, vegan leather needs to be rebranded in how they call it, because I think that already has a connotation as an alternative that people would not see as high end. And I think that can be over time taken care of. From a pricing perspective, most people don't value something at its true value until they can experience it. So if they haven't felt it, they haven't touched it, they're going to undervalue it initially. So assuming we overcome the great feel and all the comfort and whatnot, then I think that will come with time, with some level of branding and experience.
Thank you.
So we'll one more comment from Gary.
Gary also.
When I look at a menu in a restaurant and they have the vegetables on one side and they got the meats on the other side and the fishes are a lot more expensive than the vegetables. Okay, until I can get those menus, those menus to have more expensive stuff on the vegetable side than the meat side, I think they got a real problem.
Andrew, one more.
One more, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
I agree with rebranding the name. When I was growing up, we called it pleather, and now it's been rebranded to vegan leather. As long as the luxury market can make their own version of this vegan leather, so that I know the difference between Steve Madden and Chloe, so maybe the Steve Madden is made out of plastic. And the solution is making the vegan leather, like you said, out of mushrooms, out of aloe plants. As long as it's a natural fabric that, just like leather, ages even better with time, I think the luxury market can still separate themselves from the rest of the vegan leather world.
Maybe. Okay, so I'll just add one more thing, because if you know Lynn and her cars, my cars are always the upscale. And I try to buy my high-end vehicles without leather. Women, you wear shorts, you get in your car and you sit on a leather seat. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. So how do I get cloth in my high-end car? I can't even get that as an option. I have to pull out the whole seat if I don't want leather. So I don't buy leather cars that don't offer non-leather seats. I just don't buy them. And I try to remind them that women's are consumers too. So I don't think leather's a great choice in many cases.
So I'll
Yes.
I will go around.
Before we move on to Raji, what's your answer?
Our study clearly gives this 4 positioning. One is regulation. See, we give a blueprint. One is like the product has to be matched with quality and performance. Then the positioning and communication, as our person was saying, that you need to show the process of how it ages over time and it feels and smells like leather. And then a regulatory environment, which I can expand more later on industry norms. As everybody becomes conscious of this and moves, like auto manufacturers moving towards electric vehicle, would they do that? Yes, under the present government, they would do that. But if another government comes in the US, they are anti-EV. And so these are the government, they also regulate to make sure that if everybody moves towards that, yes, you can preserve the luxury positioning. And then market demand and buyer preferences. If you have like Lynn, no preference for leather, You need to assess the size of the market and see, provide options for that. So it says market demand. How do you create the market demand? Through scarcity, through education. Like now we all go to the grocery stores with our own bags. If you look at the inertia initially, it was tough to just walk with. We forget, but now it's a habit to taking the grocery bags. So that's where we will evolve into. So we give a blueprint there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So no, but I'm just saying the answer is yes. If you do these following things, the communication, positioning, and stand behind its quality.
Yes, conditional on these things. Excellent. So Raji, some comments about what you're seeing and doing right now in this space.
So I'm going to talk about 4 things, and the first few will really be talking about things I'm seeing, in the business school and when we meet our advisory board members and so on. The first thing is what's going on with the young workforce, the Gen Z. Do they want to work? Do they want to work from home? Do they want money? Do they want a universal basic income? So that's something that's really flummoxing, senior management, middle management. So that's the first thing that's happening. I don't know if there's a solution, and maybe it's generational. We do know that I think since 1995, we are living in a really big peacetime expansion. The wars that have happened here have been not ones that have involved all of us. So there's something else going on there. And maybe these young people have it right. Maybe we are working too hard. Maybe we have sold our souls to corporations or universities. But this is a problem, how to get the workforce, back on track. And I'm sure some of the managers in this room and the executives in this room are thinking about that issue. The second issue relates to the use of, I think Fari spoke to this, which is technology. I've been using ChatGPT and DALL-E and so on. I'm working on a book, and I'll speak to that later. Some of this, the AI can do things much better for some jobs than humans can, for some jobs. He was talking, and I think somebody had a question about whether the AI was true. Have you heard about hallucinations? AIs hallucinate. So I think there is some of that, but I think the problem is, I think sections of industry are going to be affected by it. I don't know about wiped out, it'd be too strong. Copywriters, direct marketers, all of that. I think there's some efficiency involved in that. So that's the second piece. The third relates a little bit to what, Vicky was talking about. And I want to relate it to something else. I'm working on a book or some research on this, which is think about the shift that is happening from sustainability and climate change to what is called circular innovations. I don't know, maybe you've heard about this, the circular economy versus the linear economy. In 2001, when, we had this big, the 9/11 attack, President Bush at that time said, economy was pulling back. He said, just go shop, do your patriotic duty by shopping. Right? So we all did it, I guess. And so we have a linear economy, which is make, use, throw. And there was an article this week about secondhand clothes that are going to Africa, apparently causing a real problem in Africa. I don't know the truth about it because to every issue, there are multiple sides. So the alternative is what is called the circular economy, which is reuse, recycle. And many of us are thinking about those things. And that has, I think, a big implication for quarterly profits of companies. If I don't upgrade and buy my 10th pair of Nikes, Nike is going to be in trouble. So I think this is something that's going to have big demand contraction effects, and we don't know what it's going to look like. I'm thinking about how I can buy less because we are all partying like there's no tomorrow, and there may not be a tomorrow for our great-grandchildren if we continue to live like this. Resource extraction, we keep on doing this, more and more of this. And the last point I sort of wanted to make, and I think this relates a little bit to something that I heard here, which is increasingly companies are feeling the impacts of political winds. 3 years ago, ESG was the best thing that happened since sliced bread, right? DE&I, I was the associate dean for DE&I, appointed by the very same president, Jay Hartzell, who has now banned DE&I, and this is happening across states. And this is not common sense. And, maybe the political pendulum swings too far. I won't take a position on it, but I think companies have to worry. Every company is, contributing to two parties. There was the Indian elections. Just now, the stock market crashed. the shares of two companies crashed like 15% and 20% because there's this political capture that's happening. People just think if they can get hold of the politician, things are going to take care of. So politics, technology, young people, the sustainability as it affects innovation. These are some things that I'm sort of thinking about, and I'll sort of pass the mic to Sandy.
Thank you, Raji.
Okay, I'm going to tell you three-ish things that I'm hearing from firms these days. And I'm curious to know if the member firms, if you also are dealing with these same issues. So the things that firms are telling me these days, one of the things is issues around privacy. And the question is, you know, what are the appropriate models around privacy? How far should we go? How can we adapt to government regulation, policies, best practices, et cetera? All right, so that's one thing that I hear a lot. And just as a straw poll, are any of the member firms also looking at or dealing with that issue? Okay, so a few. The other thing that I also am hearing a lot about is regulation, and in particular, how can we collaborate with regulation? So instead of reacting to policies that are getting passed down from the government, and then now we are scurrying to try and do something about it, can we get out in front of it and maybe work with regulators and organizations and influence the policies that come down the pike? Because I think for many businesses, you know, there's this feeling that, you know, the policies that are handed down are sort of like one size fits all. And we all know that, especially in B2B, every business is sort of unique and special. And the other thing that I'm hearing a lot about these days is, you know, what is B2B communications, and what is that looking like in the future? So, you know, I'm still trying to get a sense of, are there B2B influencers? What are those? Are they different from B2C? I think the answer is yes, but, you know, what's their role, right? And what is, you know, how are communications going to change going forward? And the last thing that I hear a lot about is this issue of kind of balance in our political position, right? So we've all seen with university presidents that there is no right response to the recent protests, right? If you're too laissez-faire or too proactive. And I think a lot of businesses, what I hear is that they are also struggling with, you know, should we have a political stance? Should we communicate that? Is it more right? Is it more left? And how can we especially protect ourselves and insulate ourselves from the backlash against greenwashing or anything else out there? So those are some of the things that I've heard about, and I'd be interested in knowing whether or not you're also dealing with similar issues.
Great, thank you. So at this point, I want to give them a chance to also not necessarily ask them to think. So Fari sort of took this vision of what is 40 years in the future and these big trends and happening. But I want to give them each a chance to sort of say, we're talking about what's happening now. We're telling you what we're talking to companies about, what projects we're working on. But what's next? What's in the next couple years that's happening that they're starting to see the leading edge of? And I want to give them a moment to comment on that.
Yeah, for the future, this topic, I'm going to relate climate change with sustainability practices and stakeholder value, like you as a customer or an employee or a distributor. And this just happened 2 weeks ago. I was returning from India to US in the flight, and the pilot was saying, I got great news for you. What is that? We were able to put out only so much carbon dioxide out as emissions because I used refueled air throughout. I step out of the plane, I was severely congested, and it took me like 10 days to get better. And the same thing with all of our friends who were coming in the flight. So what is the future here? You know, as Raji correctly pointed out, we need to save the planet today for our great grandchildren. But in the process, are we going to kill ourselves? I'm not going against it. I'm for you. I'm just saying, like, this is like just one example. And then if you take Shell versus ExxonMobil is like really going for traditional mining and going for oil fields, digging out and getting it, whereas Shell, at the cost of profit, is following sustainability practices. Similarly, Tesla investing in all these electric vehicles in terms of battery and so reducing pollution, Enphase Energy. So I can go on and on in the second paper that is you can get to read very soon. Talks about what is, you say stakeholder value creation, value appropriation, but at what cost? We are raising this question. And I just want to put it out to you as to, taking our own grocery bag is no cost. You just have to remember, it becomes a habit. But breathing a recycled air for 24 hours is sickening. So what is, there's so many examples there. So I just want to put it out there as a thought to see what do we sacrifice now and what do we preserve now is an issue, debate we need to have so that regulations are formulated in the right manner. So
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. I think VK makes a really good point, and I think I was being facetious, so I'm sorry for, butting in. I think choices are costly. I don't think they're easy, but I do believe, one of the things that Fari showed us was that our mortality rates have come down. So you're all living much longer. And thanks to modern medicine, I have a dad who's 92 years old. And he's basically being kept up only by chemicals. I mean, it's just a whole lot of stuff going on there. So I do think it's costly, and I'm not saying that. I go back again to Andrew's question to me, and, what are we thinking of? I'm working on a book, and maybe I'll, sort of shop this a little bit. Does anybody know what percentage of the population of this world is living in slums today? Any guess or a number? It's 15%. It's 1.5 billion people. It's close to 20%. Okay, it also depends on how you define slums, right? I mean, which is very different. I think historically, he had a lot of statistics from World Bank, and I've been looking at some of those numbers. I think the problem of slums and what they do and the solutions they offer are something that's really interesting to many of us. If you're from Latin America, or you're from Mexico, or you're from India, or the Philippines, or Indonesia, you've seen those housing. They are providing labor to us. They're providing labor to urban areas. They're also a big source of pollution. They're a big strain on resources. They're also a sign that the government has ignored the needs of many urban workers. Right? So it's a very complex issue, and I think there is something there to be said. In fact, I'll make a very bold claim, which is I think much of the global marketplace is actually riding on the contributions made by these slums. Cheap labor. I mean, if you're from any one of the developing countries, we all have maids. I had 2 maids, 3 cooks, the whole, where do they live? They lived in slums. Does the government provide housing? No, they don't. But marketers have to deal with this. I mean, if you want to sort of bring it back into business, what does this mean, right? And I think some of what is going on relates to climate change. I'll sort of come back to this theme, which is sort of in my issue. And I'm not saying it's not costly. We don't want people to die of poisoning on long haul flights. But I think those are some things I'm thinking about, which is how can we, as, I'd like to think I have a small voice, speak to those issues. Again, there are no solutions. I also think what Fari said, and I really liked what he did at the end of the talk, which is he said, I'm going to end on a hopeful note. I think the human species, and most of us, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, we will try all the things that don't work and then come back to doing the right thing. Right? So somewhere there will be a solution. So I'm not so pessimistic that we won't find a solution to some of the problems that are sort of on the horizon, but maybe some of us have to make more agentic choices to get there.
Okay, so I'm going to pile on a little bit with VK. I agree that technological advancements and trying to save the planet are all good things. But on the other hand, well, in this case, it's making you sick, but I will share with you my own inconveniences, right? So I have a car, an electric car, and this thing doesn't have any knobs on the dashboard. There's just a single screen. It's a single screen. Now, you think, oh, wow, that's great. That's so advanced. Okay, well, it turns out that having a knob to adjust the AC or the volume, or even being able to program your car to open the garage door, you know, when you push a button. Yeah, this advanced car can't do things like that. And then the other things that they do in the name of progress and technology is they send out these software updates. So all of my knobs are, you know, in menus and embedded in menus on a screen, which of course you don't want to look at while you're driving. And after the software update, all those things change. So, I mean, I just want my car to reliably connect with my phone, be able to open my garage door, things like this. And yes, Lynn, like the front seats are not ventilated, so it's very hot in Atlanta in the summer. And this is
To Ford.
okay. Let's talk.
I have my F-150. We'll go drive it after. The
Okay.
Lightning.
Oh yeah. See, that's the thing.
This morning.
All righty. All right. So yeah, there is something about progress and doing the right thing. And from a business standpoint, I do agree with Raji. The circular economy and the recycling, and the attention and prudence to doing more with what we already have, because our products are already so good, they last so long. From a business perspective, the implication then is now we got to change our business processes, right? Our supply chains, right? They have to, what does it mean to reuse, recycle, and, new science and new processes. And I think that's it. That's exciting. That's also where we have to move to, and that's complex. In terms of like kind of what I see in the future, I mean, I think it's a little bit more of the same. So of course, the thing that I think of going forward is still this digital disruption. And I started my career as a junior faculty member at MIT, and I joined in 1995. And of course, for those of you who are old enough to know this, the internet came along, right? And so one of my colleagues, John Little, he told us that he's teaching a class on the internet. And we were like, John, what do you know about the internet? He's like, absolutely nothing. He's like, but the students are going to teach me. And so we're like, gee, well, if John Little is paying attention to the internet, maybe we should too. And so we still have that same issue today. And, the thing about technology is the role of technology isn't interesting if all it's doing is just doing everything that we're doing, but kind of in a bigger, better, faster kind of way. What's interesting about technology is if it actually kind of fundamentally changes the phenomena. So I'll give you an example. I'm very excited about this paper that I'm publishing that's forthcoming with Stefan and Ben Beck, a PSU PhD student. And so this paper looks at the issue of, we all know we trust word of mouth. But what happens when word of mouth becomes online and electronic and between strangers? In other words, product reviews, right? How do product reviews or review platforms lead consumers to actually trust in the same way to make a purchase? And so, and the answers to all of that are in the paper. But I will also tell you, so now we're kind of moving on and we're looking at, again, this whole, not just what's the role of digital disruption, but how is it going to change things? So it used to be, or maybe it still is, that you would go into some stores to ask for advice on products. So you go into an REI store. It used to be you could go into Home Depot and there'd be knowledgeable people in the aisles to tell you which tool to choose. But as that's starting to go away, we have a lot of labor shortages. It's hard to find those kind of skilled people. How does expert advice online sort of now change our processes, right? So when I say, it's still digital, we're still talking about and thinking about digital. I think that's always our challenge going forward.
Great. So right now in the last 20, 25 minutes, I hope they inspired some questions from you all. So Lynn and I are going to go around, and if you want to pose some questions to one or all or any of the panelists, we want to give you an opportunity to do that. So anyone want to start us off with a question?
So I have a question that it could also be for Fari, and I'm reflecting on everything that's been discussed today with the technology advancements we've had in the last year or two. And I've noticed there's been a real evolution in the conversation around things like AI, biotechnology, all of the things that Fari discussed this morning. It seemed like the theme of maybe the ISBM meeting last year, as well as other industry forums, was if we as companies aren't engaging with these technologies and finding ways to leverage and embrace them, we might be missing out as individual companies on opportunities to enhance our competitiveness. It seems like in the last year that conversation has really evolved. And I'm wondering if you would agree that we almost have, as a business community, a moral imperative to engage with these technologies, to find solutions for these, major geopolitical challenges that we're all facing.
So this was exactly the topic this morning in NBC News with Mary Barra, GM CEO, saying that what is your focus? The first question was that. And she said, into electric vehicles. That's our future. We are going to go deep into that. But then our people are not buying. They're still going for either hybrid or gasoline-powered cars. So what's going to happen? And she was saying that's where we want the industry norms and the regulatory norms should match everything and force us to do that. The follow-up question was, but that's not going to happen if somebody else is going to be elected next. It's going to be not supported. And she said one thing, the industry has to rally and stand behind it, not rely on the political intervention. So in whichever industry are you in? Which industry are you in? Okay. So I'm not sure that industry is going to be that affected by any of this thing. But in terms of technological interruptions in limestone extraction, is there modernization that you have seen and the byproduct that you get out of it?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I think, a lot of questions for us as a company, because we're addressing a lot of the challenges that Sandy raised regarding, are there big downsides regarding, privacy, regarding identity? We're thinking about, if we have output from an AI, can we patent that? Do we own that? So there's a lot of potential downsides that are caveats for us as we're moving forward. When it comes to things like automating our technologies, we have labor shortages in a lot of places. How can we bring in machine learning and automation and AI to help us to enhance our processes, to differentiate ourselves? So it's definitely something that we've adopted a steering committee for AI to try to find a solution. But I feel like this has evolved so rapidly that it's caught us somewhat off guard, and we're trying to find a very quick way of trying to get up to speed and answer these questions that we have.
Yeah, so you are in an industry where even carbon emissions is an issue. And so what you're doing is how to build these capabilities faster and in a dynamic manner, evolving manner. That's, I think I wasn't here, but I think Gary pointed out to our forthcoming book on transformative marketing with Phil. When we talk to industries worldwide, the three things that are being told to us consistently is that, one, you need to up your capabilities and you need to make it dynamic, because otherwise you'll become extinct. Second, the resources that you have, human resources, which all of you know, have to be retrained or let go. And what is happening in the marketplace is they're being let, it's Microsoft, people from the cloud. So they're replaced by technology. And the third thing is who you're going to serve. which is the community, going to be your customer, or where is the demand coming from? Is it, and every executive said global. But then the question was raised with this geopolitical tension and the nationalism again resurfacing. What Le Pen was mentioned as a threat to Macron. If that happens, and with US leadership changes, where is the demand? There's not going to be that much demand. It's going to export, import, and this is trade war. So you are really facing catastrophic future. So the solution to that is to adopt more efficient practices with the technology. So you lower your cost. You may be investing more. The quarterly profits might get hit, but that's okay. But you're setting yourself for success in the future rather than downfall right now. So I just thought I'll put it out.
So I have a question right here.
Just back to what you said, you just like touched on the question I wanted to ask, right? Fari touched on deglobalization, and then my question is around how this is going to impact B2B marketing, especially around restriction of B2B partnerships across regions, US, Europe, China, right? There's a lot of deglobalization going on in the digital economy. We can't sell chips to you. We can't sell this technology to you. So what is going to be the future impact of these things happening? You just touched on that briefly, on so many companies, because it's going to limit sales and restrict sales in the future, right? You have to make your projections on the impact of these geopolitical events and how it's going to affect your company going forward. So that's my question.
Exactly. I can answer it, but I'm going to let the expert Sandy on partnership and alliances to first take a cut at it, and then Raji will also address it.
Okay, so you bring up a good point, right? And I think as we think about partnerships and alliances, I mean, I said earlier that one of the things that firms have been talking to me about these days is kind of partnering with regulation. And I think when we think about global economy and trade, a large part of that is a function of each country's regulation, right? Tariffs, whatever, getting back at you for this or that. And so I think in terms of thinking about partnerships and what firms can do, I think there's maybe some truth to this idea of working with regulators, working with the government, and maybe trying to think about how can we have a greater voice in shaping the regulation that sort of makes sense for businesses. I mean, my impression of a lot of, the politics that I read about is like, I kind of see a lot of politicians who get up and they say things about businesses, but they really don't understand how a business works, right? And those are the ones that are handing down the laws. So I feel like a partnership in terms of giving more of a voice to business to help them temper and understand that could certainly not hurt the process.
Raji, you want to add to that?
Couple of minutes. So I have a slightly different take in the sense that I think I'm very cynical about politicians, as most of us are, I'm sure. And I think some of the rhetoric is meant during election season to get people to vote for them. I actually do believe that the politicians, or at least the policymakers, the administration in different countries has a pretty good sense of the interconnectedness of the global economy. And even the worst of the hate mongers and the restrictionists will actually behave in practical ways when the rubber meets the road. Because the jobs in India and Bangladesh and Pakistan and Indonesia are dependent on us buying more clothes in the mall or online. And they know it. I mean, they have the numbers, they know it, but it's not what the street wants to hear there, which is like, we're going to shut things down, go away, and, all of that. So I do think ultimately some sense will prevail on the interconnectedness of our economies.
Oh, can I also just add to that? In that vein, I feel like more and more government is attempting or trying to listen to more scientists or more research or even more academics. So as an example, on Friday, I'll be speaking on a panel in DC about basically how our research can impact policy. And the research that I told you about that I did with Stefan and Ben, that got a hearing by the FTC Commission. So, and there are other academics I know of who have been listened to from the SEC, they presented their research. So I would like to think that in that vein, although it's not what we read in the news, maybe there is a little more openness to listening to alternative opinions.
Also, I think, and some of us will know, are more cynical. I'm really quite cynical these days, but I think politicians win elections, and I think the bureaucrats run the countries. So I think there is some stability across, and it's less pessimistic than we'd like to think. So hopefully.
All right. I think we have a question over here. Do they have the mic?
Yes.
There you go.
You all touched a little bit on this topic, but for me, the most disturbing concept right now in marketing is something that has been put forward by Philip Cutler 2 months ago, again, the concept of demarketing. So my question is, what is the future of B2B demarketing?
Yeah, no, I work very closely with him, and what he means, at least demarketing is become more socially conscious in the sense that companies should not be marketing to make money and harm the consumers. So in that context, is talking about demarketing. But in the B2B context, even if you take the shipbuilding industry, Mariotti, Italian shipbuilding, they use completely sustainable materials to operate the luxury ship. And in terms of tourism and so I'll give you these 2 examples and connect the demarketing. Like you go to, you stay anywhere you want, but there are like socially, environmentally conscious places created where people can rent and stay. It's expensive, but very socially, environmentally friendly. So now, his point is, in terms of demarketing, is can you demarket what you're saying, good for you to market the sustainability practiced goods like the ship. The ship is, normally if you go on a cruise, maybe $1,000, you'll have to pay maybe $1,400 in the ship. But it's completely solar, all the waste not dumped in the ocean, recycled, everything without harming the consumers. That's why you're paying more. Not the recycled air in the plane. But so the demarketing is for the conventional products, and remarketing or proper marketing, which we call now as transformative marketing, is what we call for all these climate change sustainability practices and the new age technologies. And we define this transformative marketing with respect to each of the tools, either the drones use or robotics or blockchain, how, unless companies transform themselves and be ready to face the future with these resources that we have, they will become extinct. This is our premise there. And we give a lot of examples how companies are folding up, tracing the evolution. So demarketing is necessary for bad practices where it is doing it. That is the context is which.
Can I just speak to that for a second? I think you raise a really good point, and this is something that there's a contradiction, there's a paradox here. Those of us who are working here have 401ks, right? Or ETFs or whatever it is that we're doing. We need companies to keep increasing their sales every quarter or every year in order for our shareholder value to come in. But on the other hand, there is, I think, a reality of the demarketing, which is don't sell useless products to people so that it goes into the trash can. And I think there's a tension. I'm not sure there's an easy solution. Not necessarily, I'm not answering it in the context of B2B, but the concept of reusing, recycling, repurposing, all that is going to decrease demand, which means that people are not going to hire new executives. They're not going to, fund, the sales are going to decline. So I think it's a paradox. It's not clear to me that I have a solution, but it's something that I think about, just I think the way you're thinking about it. all this is great in a conference, but I've got to meet my sales targets. And, I don't want you to repurpose. I wish you'd buy my new products, so I think it's a really important question. I don't know if I have any answers, but yeah.
Well, I would add that at the same time that demand is decreasing for the new products, it's also increasing demand for other forms of activities and value-added processes. And that's a good thing too. I think of demarketing and B2B in a slightly different way. And the way I think about it is I've been studying, and I have an interest in kind of looking at and applying distribution theory to emerging economies, right? And the idea there, it turns out the business model for B2B in emerging economies is very different than in developed economies, in terms of how and where you put plants. And, there's more of a focus sort of on the local community and meeting social needs before you meet business needs. And so I think a lot of, so when I think of demarketing and B2B, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. Right. And I know that many firms are interested in going into emerging economies, and I think it's a great thing because of the potential for job creation. And I feel like a market mechanism can sometimes lift more people out of poverty than a government solution in some cases. But I also think that the way we do it is different. And that's kind of what I'm trying to understand now.
Great. Thank you. I saw Irv has the mic here, and then I'll come over here.
In response to your question about the vegan leather issue, I thought I'd give you an example from history. About 50 years ago, it was projected that the number of shod feet in the world was growing much faster than the number of cows, so that there'd be a shortage of leather for shoes. DuPont put a lot of money into developing an artificial leather. Well, most of the artificial leathers of the time were not breathable. So they were not acceptable for any kind of quality shoes. They developed a product called Corfam, which was a breathable artificial leather, basically. Had very nice features and wouldn't scuff, things of that sort. And a lot of money put into it and developed. Well, the product was a total failure for a couple of reasons. One principal reason was that whereas leather adapted to the shape of the foot, Corfam didn't. So if a shoe didn't fit the instant you put it on, it never fit. And people were used to having new shoes not fit until they fit like an old shoe. The other reason it was breathable, but not quite as breathable as leather. But the answer to the shortage of leather was not use leather. Canvas took its place. People started wearing sneakers and a whole variety of other kinds of shoe materials. So perhaps the answer to that is not to position any new materials as an artificial leather or similar to leather, but as a wholly new kind of material that does different kinds of things and can do different kinds of things. But I thought that example from history might be useful.
Yeah, very useful. And as somebody pointed out, like it's the look and feel and touch, all those things that you traditionally expect from this leather that you wanted to get, that because that affects your emotion, that you're emotionally connected to these products and the feel of it. That's why. But maybe offline we'll talk about what Gucci and Prada are doing actually in the factory. Now trying all these composite materials that degrade by itself and not cause anything. But the quality is coming down slightly. And so now they're working to match the quality of the original product. Like you can keep a Prada bag forever, a kind of thing, and nothing happens. There's no degradation. But these materials, they do. And so that's the technology that they're working on. Certainly thinking about what you suggested, find an alternative way, go away completely from that. And that's what's happening to the car material, like composite material, plane. There was a beautiful article on every time a plane goes in the air, it gets hit by lightning at any given time in the air, about 150 lightning strikes at any given time. This plane gets hit, but how nothing happens to them. and how they have evolved into using these materials, but it's become heavy, more fuel consumption in the process. Now they're re-engineering, reinventing to going back to like still protect it from lightning, but go for lighter and less usage. But then aviation fuel itself is now being discussed. Can we fly with solar panels airplane? That's the best option. You can have completely fresh air, everything. Fantastic. But it's going to take some time, and the technology is already there, and so on. So we are there. Our future is bright. I want to leave on that note that our future is going to be bright. It is the temporary inconvenience that we see right now, So our great grandchildren will be happier.
Yeah. Thank you, professors. Very intriguing and interesting sharings. So I came from, I am a B2B marketing manager now at a finance company in Dallas. And one interesting point and one reason that your sharings, lots of points, actually reminded me of my memories before is that both of my previous job experience, one is from XR AR goggles company, Pico, under ByteDance. The other is a finance industry company. I was in the marketing manager role for B2B session, but it's like a B2C and B2B, like we have both branches. And the interesting fact is that the company themselves are famous for is B2C branch. The influencers cooperations is a huge marketing budget, way more than the B2B branch that I was taking charge of. However, majority of the revenues for both of the companies are coming from B2B, including Pico. I can just say here, like the VR goggles, the majority of their revenues in the US market are from B2B. They even not officially get in the US market from their in terms of B2C session. And one interesting point that Professor Sandy Jap, you mentioned is about the role of B2B influencers. What are their roles and how that's different from the B2C influencers? My experience is that we thought that would be totally different. However, since we invested, took Pico, the VR goggle company as an example, we invested lots of influencer marketing fee to engage or to interact with those influencers on TikTok on B2C session. However, when we want to use or we want to promote our B2B product, we tend to realize that for B2B, what we want to seek for is not those people who have huge public influence. Instead, they have they are in a niche or in a social circle or in this industry. They have more connections. If we want to promote our products in a certain industry a circle, we would tend to find those people have power or know lots of connections in that area or specifically in this industry. They might not be that famous publicly. However, they can make us more connections when we go to market to the certain region. So that would be especially helpful.
Yeah, so I love this. I definitely want to talk to you more after. But to your first point, I think I'm not surprised that B2B is driving the revenues and is the real growth engine, right? And but maybe there's an inordinate amount of attention to what's happening B2C. But that's really interesting. And I agree, like a B2B influencer can't be the same thing. I mean, it has to be, I think, someone with some expertise in a particular area, and that's why maybe they have a following. But yeah, I would love to talk with you more, and especially, about how that gets monetized and whether or not it's believable and things like that. But thank you for sharing that.
Raji or VK, you want to comment on B2B influencing at all?
Curious, how many of the B2B managers in this room are thinking about TikTok as a vehicle for promotion? Anybody? No. Okay. This was just a thought that came up because
LinkedIn is the comment.
I was thinking more of TikTok because
Yeah. Well, so does anybody here use influencers on LinkedIn? And if so, I mean, yeah, so would you mind to share with us a little bit about what that looks like? And I'm deathly curious.
Yeah, so I'm in the food industry, and we use influencers like master chefs that will come out and talk through. Plus, we'll have industry experts. So B2B influencing is very interesting. Your audience is limited. They are usually more educated, classical B2B. So you need to have very credible people speaking about it. And then we get into the technical elements very, very fast. So it is not an emotional buy. With classical B2B, it's more of a technical buy. So known people, so they'll be like master flavorists, master certified chefs that'll speak on LinkedIn or write a paper that people will pick up. But TikTok, no.
And you want one more comment on that?
In B2B, I think, Andrew, you should speak to this, actually. You should close it out by bringing out the research. Andrew and I and Bob Leon were able to do that a few years ago. The B2B influencers, we define them as businesses that help you grow. Not an individual, but who is an influencing client who you can team up with, and they would voluntarily give testimonials in the form of either whatever. You could speak, Andrew. Yeah.
I'm not the expert on the panel.
Okay. So with the video testimony and then having this congruence, if you're selling Cisco networks, then you have the product congruency, the role, who you are selling to. The CMO is the one buying. And then if the testimony is from CMO, you have the role congruency, industry congruency, and a larger firm. You find them to be more influential in converting prospects into clients. And this was like, I think, 6-7 years study we did, and then now repeatedly being implemented in B2B organizations as a blueprint. You want to pick typically only 1 to 2% of your clients are willing to act as any references. Given that small population that you have, how to make them more effective, the blueprint was created. Video testimony, role congruency, product congruency, industry congruency, larger size firms, and if they are in the same, like small to medium business in that group, or medium business in that group, or large business, you get 90, 80, more than 87% conversion of the prospects to clients. And repeatedly, we keep doing this.
Yes. So we actually we have an hour and a half for lunch. So we're going to give one more question right here, and then we'll wrap up and head to lunch out in the atrium. Yes, Jerry.
Not so much a question as a comment, since we're trying to finish on an optimistic note.
Yes.
I'm always amazed at how quickly, well, not always quickly, but how markets adjust. Sandy, someone at Tesla must have thought that screen was a better idea. They'll figure out that it wasn't a better idea. I've heard two news.
Jerry, I think they need a voice of the customer intervention.
Yeah. Clearly, your check is in the mail. I've heard 2 news stories in the last 2 days that have amazed me. The first is they looked at all new power generation being built, and I'm not sure if this was US only or worldwide. Only 5% of it was carbon-based, oil and gas. Almost 90% of it was solar and wind. Wow. The second story was that, and this totally amazed me, both the US and I think China are about to hit their carbon peak. And in the next few years, the amount of carbon they'll be putting into the atmosphere will start to decline. I had no idea. We've been screaming about this for 20 years. We're finally winning.
All right. So now, excellent comment. I want to give each of our panelists about 30 seconds to make a final comment to spread optimism and hope about the future.
Tell us what to worry.
I'll go last.
It can't be about recycled air. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think the data is compelling in the sense that if we look to the past, which is that well-being and standards of living have increased substantially. Yeah, there's a lot of variance in our ability to control and deal with technological disruptions, But if the past is a good predictor of the future, and there's a lot of inertia in history, then I think in the main, we should be getting better in the future as well. So I'm optimistic. I hope to still be here, and I hope to see you then too.
Yes.
Yeah. Couple of things I think, and I'll speak to, people like Bill Gates have been talking about how this is a time when the violence in the world is at its lowest level. It's not something we touched on today because we were not talking about those issues. So I think we are living actually in good times. I think some of the costs that we see are also arising on account of the good times, in the sense that, age, we are living much longer. We have all of these products we can consume and so on. Finally, do think, on an optimistic note, I do think we will figure it out as a human species. I do actually have faith in us as a group of individuals. I think tribalism is well and rife, and it's always been there. And it's a resource allocation issue, but I think we'll kind of figure it out. I think we'll come together if there's a big enough threat for our system. And you made a great point, which is, those two facts were interesting. The carbon peak, so maybe it's actually working. So all that, hand wringing that was happening in the last 20 years has resulted in some positive outcomes. So.
Yeah, sure. Just piggybacking on that carbon peak, it didn't come on its own. It came from our practices, that how we are consciously evolving into using safer products and better sustainable products and so on. So the change has to come from within us, and that has begun already. So I just want to say that if you have not thought about it, please think about it and change. Then the whole world will change to a beautiful, greener future. Thank you.
Let's give them a big round of applause.